Hey, I didn't film an intro to this because I really filmed it with Dale for a podcast, but I also filmed it so I could bring you all the information on YouTube. So this is my makeshift intro. I hope you enjoy it. It has a big impact, and I think sometimes that patients don't realize the impact it has, and that impact tends to carry on after they're done with their infertility treatment, even when they have young children. If you think about it, like you said, sex is supposed to be spontaneous and fun, and what happens, it becomes scheduled. We have to have sex at a certain time. If we don't get pregnant, there's feelings of inadequacy. What's wrong with me? Am I broken? There's a lot of resentment. It really can affect just the scaffolding of a good relationship. And it also turns this whole sex thing into a bigger party, for lack of a better term. So it used to be that you and your partner would be, alone together, that sex becomes, it's your own thing. But now it involves doctors, nurses, blood draws, hormones, and it just becomes this whole bigger ordeal that it loses a lot of its enjoyment. Right, so I think just a good awareness that this is a possibility is really important. And it's very easy to fall into that gotta get pregnant, this is what we're doing. But you really still wanna focus on your relationship, and you still wanna nurture your relationship. So for example, you might say, okay, now's the time we have to have sex, but let's have sex when we're not supposed to, like when it's not that timing in order to get pregnant. Let's just focus on each other and focus more towards pleasure and enjoyment instead of the goal of getting pregnant. So even through the whole infertility treatment, it's important to be aware of what's going on. The other thing is that is really important is good communication, because there's so many feelings involved with this, and it's a roller coaster ride. Each time you're waiting for that pregnancy test, and it's ups and downs. You can sort of get involved in your own feelings and harbor resentments and anger, and then you and your partner may kind of separate and not communicate as well. But I think it's really important to continue to keep those lines of communication open. The other part that plays a role in all of this is ultimately when and if you do become pregnant, now you throw kids into the mix. And that in and of itself is difficult for your sex life, because for many women, and not all, these are generalizations, once you have a child, now your focus is that child, as it should be. But you don't want to forget about your relationship and continue to work on your relationship, because it tends to happen, especially in the beginning after you have a baby or two, if you do infertility or more, who knows, that you are getting no sleep. Maybe the baby's sleeping in your bed, but don't do that. That's not recommended, but people tend to do that. Right. And it really takes away from your relationship with your partner. So you might want to consider, getting a babysitter or leaving the baby with someone so you and your partner can go out and spend time with each other and reconnect, especially after all of that roller coaster journey that you've been through. And I think that moms sometimes feel guilty. They feel bad. I can't leave my baby. I have to be there. I'm a bad mom if I leave my child. But it's really the whole family that you want to focus on too. You can't forget your spouse. You really got to keep, and a long-term partnership is work. It is. And it's not like the beginning of a relationship when everything is a happy honeymoon, everything's great. As you go down that road, and especially as children grow up, you're confronted with so many other issues. You still have to work on that relationship. And I believe that's true, not just for women who've gone through infertility, but for all women in general. We tend to get busy with our jobs and our career and our kids. We can't forget to focus on the relationship. So whether or not the birth control pill affects desire is kind of, the jury is out. But the way that it works, it theoretically could. So the birth control pill, when you swallow a pill, it goes through your liver. And it makes your liver make a protein called sex hormone binding globulin that binds to testosterone, and makes that testosterone unavailable for use at target tissues. So it's not in your brain, that's telling you, oh, I want to have sex. Testosterone plays a big role in desire, but it's not the only thing that plays a role in desire. So when I see couples, and a woman has been on the pill and they have low desire, I'll often change them just because I know that we don't want to sop up all the testosterone and keep it bound to that protein. We want it to be available for their brain, the rest of their body. But by the same token, it's not that straightforward, because if you're on a birth control pill, well, maybe now you're, someone who now, infertility aside, you feel comfortable, you're not going to get pregnant, or maybe your bleeding is less on a birth control pill. So, if you're not trying to get pregnant or your bleeding is less, those things can improve your drive. But yes, the pill can play a role. Now, the question is whether it continues to play a role after you stop. And that's a good question. So I would say it's not definitive. I don't think I've ever seen this written in a paper, but what we do know is that sex hormone binding globulin, when you stop the pill, doesn't always go back to what it was before the birth control pill. It goes down, so you have more free testosterone floating around in your blood, but it never quite gets back to its initial level. So theoretically, it could play a role. But the thing with drive and sex drive is that it is so complex. It has to do with everything. It has to do with the relationship. It has to do with, even if you have a perfect relationship, it has to do with your ability to communicate. It has to do with what your parents taught you, what your religion taught you. It has to do with whether or not you have chronic disease that's playing a role. I mean, things like diabetes and neuropathies, there's so many things that can play a role. Cancer. So I would say that sex drive issues or low libido is the most complex issue that I treat. And it's never just one thing. It's never just due to one thing. It's usually due to several. But infertility definitely has a huge impact on sex drive. So when you have endometriosis, you may have painful sex or dyspareunia. So if you have painful sex, then you'll have no sex drive, because why would you want to have sex if it's going to hurt? So endometriosis definitely plays a role in low drive. And the thing with sexuality is there's several facets to sexual issues and sexual health. There's low libido, there's problems with arousal, there's problems with orgasm or problems with pain, but they don't happen separately. It's like one of those Venn diagrams where they're all connected, because if you have pain, you'll have low libido, you may not be able to orgasm. If you have low libido, maybe you won't feel aroused, maybe you'll have vaginal dryness and wetness. So it's just, they all intertwine. I was just going to say that the role that depression plays in all of this is big, because there's so much stress with infertility. And if you were somebody who had endometriosis, you've probably been through surgeries, you've been through all sorts of medicines to help with your pain. Now you try and get pregnant and you can't, and it tends to be all your friends are having babies, and why not me? Am I broken? And so depression in and of itself can lower your sex drive, because just as a woman might feel like there's something wrong with her, 40% of infertility is male factor. And so, now the on the male side, okay, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough. And then all of that plays into your ability to maintain an erection, and it can lead to depression. And so, in my practice, I only treat women, but yes, this can wreak havoc on men too. I think the best steps is to take time to focus on each other. As I mentioned earlier, to reconnect, take sex out of okay, we have to have a baby, have sex when you're not at your most fertile, be pleasure oriented instead of goal oriented. I think that's really important for both couples. And then to communicate. because like I had mentioned, there's all that, resentment and anger, and that just weighs on the stress of trying to get pregnant. And then there's financial stressors too with, infertility. IVF is expensive, and intrauterine insemination. It's very stressful. So with that said, you also want to figure out some coping mechanisms for you to deal with stress and anxiety. So I'm a big fan of yoga. Some people love it, some people aren't into it, but you want to figure out some ways to take that stress, to lower your stress level, which is very, very difficult in this situation.
Taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. You have to take care of yourself. Yeah. I guess I would like to add that, we don't always talk about treatment for sexual issues for women. And there is help. There is treatment. I feel like a lot of women are unaware that there are things you can do to improve your libido, to rekindle the flame.
But you hear about the low T clinics all the time.
I know. And for women, it's just not as high on the radar. But there are physicians and nurse practitioners and providers who can help you get through sexual problems. We think they're very important, and there are plenty of things you can do. So don't just brush it under the rug and say, oh, well, it's over. It's never going to be like it was. Seek help. Hey, so thanks for tuning in. I hope I got all of your questions answered regarding infertility and sexuality. Please subscribe and share, like, and leave me comments. I'd be happy to answer anything. So have a good day. Bye-bye.